The Big Sur update that you should install right away. MacBooks are coming at WWDC. iMac teardowns and your questions. It's the iCave. I'm iCave Dave and I simplify Apple so that everything just works for you, and let's get into the news. We've got a lot to talk about today and my voice is a bit rough, so sorry about that. But the reason I didn't record this last night instead of this morning is because I was sneezing my head off. I think Siri might have coughed on me as she was clearing her desk. But macOS Big Sur 11.4 was released yesterday with a security fix for a 0-day vulnerability, i.e. one that the company wasn't aware of before finding that it was being actively exploited. That's terrifying. It worked by piggybacking off apps like Zoom and could be capable of not only taking screenshots without the user's knowledge, but also bypass other privacy protections, providing full disk access, screen recording, and more. So yeah, go and update as soon as this video is done, but don't leave before the end because it really hurts, you know, the video performance and stuff, and I'm more interested in my video performance than your security. iOS and iPadOS 14.6 has also been released to the public, which adds support for spatial audio, podcast subscriptions, and family Apple Card memberships, so it's probably time to go and update all the things while you're at it. Next up, it looks like we are very much getting a new MacBook Pro less than 2 weeks from now at WWDC. Jon Prosser has said on Twitter that he can confirm that the MacBook Pro is coming, but I have to say all of these Apple websites calling Jon a hit or miss leaker can just get right in the sea. Now, I really like Jon and what he's doing, and according to AppleTrack, his leaks have been accurate 78.6% of the time. So that's almost 4 out of 5 leaks that have been correct, which is more accurate than both MacRumours and 9to5Mac, and more accurate than the Wall Street Journal, Kuo Ming Chi, who they also put on this absolute pedestal, and many others. Plus, MacRumours have only stuck their neck out 34 times, while Jon is rated across 142 rumours. So, can we stop this now? Also, the new invites that came out for WWDC include one of the Memoji wearing glasses, and you can read code in the glasses, which happens to correspond to emoji, the knife and fork, sleeping face, and the laptop emoji, which is a nice little eat sleep code Easter egg, I think. Although a lot of rumour sites were pointing to this as confirmation of the MacBooks, I don't think so. So the MacBook Pro is basically being confirmed at this point, and will most likely be the version with the additional I/O in terms of MagSafe charging, more Thunderbolt, SD card reader and HDMI ports, all returning to Apple's top-of-the-line notebooks. My thoughts are still that just as Apple released what looked like their full range of M1 products, although the iMac did come later in November, that this time out they'll likely release the full range of M1X, or whatever the name is, products together. And now that we've already seen the iMac in its 24-inch form, the larger size shouldn't be a huge shock other than how big the display is. I think that 31.5 inches is the most likely and would be marketed as 32, as the 24 inch is actually 23.5, I believe. Rounding out the range with the MacBook Pro in 14 and 16-inch flavours, and also the Mac Mini with M1X. One more little tidbit as well before we get into your questions. The 7 GPU core version of the new iMac has only one fan inside, while the higher binned 8-core versions actually have dual fans. It also seems that the new iMac uses the same adhesive to attach to the display as the previous iMacs, which pleased iFixit, as they are in the process of completing their teardowns, and it's a lot less gloopy and sticky than the ones that the iPads use. They also mentioned that the cables and ribbons have reasonable slack between the display and the main body, so Apple may have actually considered repairability here. And I also just want to say thank you to everyone that wished us congratulations. We did hit 7k finally. Let's get it to 10, let's get it to 20, let's just do this. Social Blade, which is the kind of tracker for most of the YouTube and social stuff, seems to think that we will hit 20,000 subs in about 6 months' time. Fingers crossed, that seems like a legit channel. Right, let's get into your questions. If you've got a question you want me to answer, all you do, down in the comments section, hashtag iCaveAnswers, and yeah, you'll get shouted out. First up, Cian Moran asks, iCaveAnswers, how powerful do you see the M1X 16 and 32 core GPUs being? And is it fair to just double or quadruple the FPS that we are getting in games with the M1? Very good point. It's not necessarily something that scales linearly. We have done a full video on the performance that we expect for the M1X and the other variants that are coming all the way up to a 32-core Mac Pro, which now looks like it's been replaced with a 40-core, which is just even more insane. But I believe the way that we worked it out was about 75% faster for each doubling of the cores, so it's going to be pretty impressive, bearing in mind that the M1 is equivalent to about a 1050 Ti. I'll link to the video up here and you can go and check out all the stuff. Allen-B unboxings and news. I will think that iOS 15 and iPadOS 15 will have a huge redesign and will have an Apple theme store. Yeah, that's something I hadn't actually considered before. Like, if Apple is going to bring this level of customization to the iPhone and iPad, that they could actually allow people to add whole themes with icon packs, wallpapers, all that kind of stuff. Now, I'm not 100% sure that that is the way that Apple will go, but it's definitely a possibility. The Golden S asks, Arcade Answers, do you think that AMD will try to beat Apple? Because AMD does not like to be beaten, and I think when they get beaten twice, they come back with vengeance and a knife covered in Intel blood. Yeah, I don't think any of these computer manufacturers are going to take it lying down that the M1 is here. And let's be clear, the M1 doesn't beat everything. It's not the ultimate chip. It's not one thing to rule them all. It's not one ring. What it is a very efficient, very capable laptop chip, which also works on the desktop. Don't get me wrong, because that's what I've got right here. The M1 is a great chip. The M1X is going to be an even better chip. AMD is already doing some stuff with their APUs where they've got the built-in graphics and they've got the built-in CPU and stuff where they are actually performing better than the M1. However, they're also doing it at like 90 odd watts compared to the M1's 15 in most cases. So I would say that although they've been able to outperform it, they haven't been able to outperform it on efficiency, which means that your laptop's not going to last as long. And Apple is all about getting the right balance of things with the iPhones, with everything else. They always make sure that the battery life is going to give you the usability as well as giving you enough performance to do what you need to do. Whereas others kind of go balls to the wall and try and get as much performance as they can and kind of neglect some of the other stuff. So if you've ever seen those spider diagrams, they're kind of very skewed to one side, whereas Apple tends to be quite round. So their products are generally better performing across the board, but not in one specific direction. And this is the same that we see with Android phones as well, where you'll get one Android phone that's got an amazing camera, one with the most insane display you've ever seen. They'll all have their kind of niche and their kind of special features, but nothing is as rounded and as good across the board as Apple in general. Next up, Corvin asks, iCav Answers, with Apple pulling Rosetta from the forefront of the Mac experience due to Intel's reproach over licenses, is it possible that Apple will package Rosetta as a paid add-on for those long tail of users needing to run unmodified x86 binaries and cover Intel's licensing fees? That's a really interesting point. Now, we did definitely see that Intel were having some effect on Apple. They were certainly not happy that Apple were kind of doing a translation layer. Kind of all still feeds into my thoughts that why on earth would Apple want to release more Intel stuff when Intel are being quite hostile to Apple. It looks like there might be another Mac Pro that comes with Intel, but I would love it, love it, if Apple was to come out at WWDC and introduce this new Mac Pro with Intel and go, and it's available today. But also, in December, we're going to be bringing out this version of the Mac Pro with Apple Silicon, and you might want to wait. So, I think that Apple has definitely got some... if Apple does release anything else with Intel, it's because they have a contract where they have something left on the contract where they have to fulfill it. It doesn't mean they have to want to sell it. But in terms of the Rosetta stuff, I don't see Apple charging extra for it necessarily. It might become something that they do a subscription service for. I don't honestly see them doing that or sell it as a bonus package. I think if Apple's going to keep it around, they'll keep it around and they'll just include it. They'll eat the price because the licensing that they're saving from Intel on the chips won't be a problem anyway. But I also don't think that Apple's going to keep it around for more than a couple of years because it just makes sense that Apple wants to get everything native as soon as possible. If they keep Rosetta around, there's no real incentive for developers to actually bring their software native to Apple Silicon, which is where they will get much better performance. So I think Apple needs to give developers a bit of a nudge in that direction anyway. And Corvin also asks, why are we still holding out for M1X processors with A14 architecture 8 months after the M1 Max release? Doesn't it make more sense in the world that an A15 architecture comes out in the fall called M2X with 2 performance cores for the iPhones, 4 performance cores for the iPads and MacBook Airs, and 4 or more performance cores for the rest of the Macs? No. So the M1X stuff is already in production. They've already been making these chips for a long time, and it's very much like they do with the iPads. This M1X will probably still way outperform the M3 when that finally arrives. Now, it looks as well very much like, I know there were some comments that they might be using a different node for M1X. Pretty sure they won't be. I'm pretty sure that the M1X will be built literally out of A14 cores, but there will just be so many more of them that it will brute force its way through everything. And remember, we're still getting 1750-ish performance single core out of the A14 cores, out of the M1's performance cores. So it is no slouch whatsoever in terms of single core performance. For things like Java, that is single cored. But when the M2 comes out, that's going to be more efficient again. So they will have the opportunity to do that stuff. Now, you have to remember as well that there are production timelines and things like that. So they won't be able to do M2 and M2X all at the same time, because the M2X will probably have a higher failure rate than the M2, just as the M1X probably has a higher failure rate than the M1 because it's a bigger, more complex die. So there's going to be more errors across the kind of size of each chip. Not per unit area, but the fact that you've got more area in the first place means that there is more opportunity for errors. So Apple will always pump out the iPhone chips and the iPad chips and the M1 chips first, or the M2 chips first, and then they will move on to the higher powered stuff where they can afford to take a little bit more time because they're going to be producing much lower volumes in total. Joe asks, iCave answers, do you see the return of the iPod Touch considering how much unsubstantiated rumours are circling around at the moment? So initially, when I saw these concepts floating around, and one of them is done by Apple Tomorrow, who is our, obviously, renderer of choice, Render Boy Apple Tomorrow, and I said, why would they bother? And then I thought to myself, what if they build a DAC into it? So you could basically pick yourself up an iPod Touch, which has got the high-quality audio, it streams it using Wi-Fi, which is absolutely fine, to your headphone port on it, runs it through its own DAC and straight to good headphones. That would be a really compelling option if Apple can do it. I'm not saying they will, but that would be the only reason I would see it coming, to include Apple's lossless and spatial audio tech. Cool, thank you so much for watching today, guys. Questions down in the comment section, #iCaveAnswers. I will see you tomorrow. Thanks so much.